On this episode of DH Prepping, we talk about the simple way that we ran the electrical in our shipping container cabin. This is Desert Homestead Prepping. Make sure to like and subscribe and hit that bell for notifications.
All right, welcome back. Thanks for tuning back in. We're inside the cabin now. I decided that this video would be about the electrical and why I chose to go with what we have in the cabin. So I set up the electrical in this cabin to be basically identical to what you're going to find in an RV. And I did that on purpose so that it could be easily adapted to a solar panel setup. And so it's set up primarily with 12 volt. And so the 12 volt is what supplies the lighting. So these are all used RV lights that I salvaged out of an old RV. And the porch light is off of an RV. The switches are 12 volt switches. And the water pump for the water is a 12 volt RV water pump. Now I do have standard, 110 electricity, which is something that you'll find in an RV also. It will have 110 outlets throughout the RV, but we're not dependent on the 110 to be able to have the comfort that we need. So that's how the electrical is set up in here. And right now, I have it plugged in just basically like you would an RV, where you run an extension cord off to the power box. And that's how we're getting the power to this. And I do have the solar panels. I just don't have them set up right now. Not really necessary at the moment because I can plug the thing in. And so what I have is a voltage converter that will take the 110 and will change that over to 12 volt DC. And it'll charge the batteries and supply us with the light and the electricity that we need for the water pump. And it's really nice to have it set up that way. If we were to lose power, we most likely wouldn't even know, because we still have the batteries hooked up. We'd still have the water pump. We'd still have the lights. We have these 12 volt fans. So that's how I set that up. And it works pretty good. And we also set it up so that we could really use the minimal amount of electricity, because we're not going to be trying to, power like a large screen TV and all these, amenities like a toaster oven and stuff like that off of a solar panel setup. We're going to be just using the basics. We want to set this thing up so that if we do run into a situation where America does collapse and we no longer have electricity, we no longer have stores or whatever, then we can still live in here and be comfortable and be self-sufficient. And so we have many solar flashlights, solar lanterns, the little yard lights that you can buy at Walmart or whatever hardware store that lights your pathway at your home. Those things are cheap and they work great. So we have lots of those set up. We also have kerosene lanterns, and then of course, our primary source of heat in the winter, and also where we do all our cooking in the winter, is the wood burning stove. Now, when it comes to how I strung the electricity, and that actually kind of segues into the plumbing, but we'll get to that. is I ran it up into the ceiling. So what I did was I created a drop ceiling so that the top of the shipping container is actually about 6 inches from the top of this sub ceiling that I've created. And that way I could run all of the electrical all up there, and I could drop it down within the grooves of the corrugation. And so it all runs across and it can drop straight down in these grooves, and just like that. And this paneling is actually screwed right to the outer part of the corrugation, flat on that. So when I set the 110, you got to be very careful, because this back here is all metal. Like, you don't want to ground out your 110. So I have these the outlet boxes, the housing are plastic, and I had to get the shallow ones so that all of my electrical connections are within that plastic box. And the shallow ones were just perfect to be able to fit within the grooves of that corrugation. So that's how the electrical is set up. It all runs in the ceiling, and then it drops down in the corrugations where we need it. Now, also with the 12 volt, we have those little cigarette lighter outlets that are hooked up all over the place. If you want to charge your phone, or if you have a voltage inverter, which we do have a voltage inverter, to be able to convert that DC back into 110. So if we don't have any power coming from the grid, we can convert the DC into 110 for, things like charging the laptop. The other thing we need the voltage inverter for is for the on-demand water heater. The on-demand water heater runs off of propane, but it also needs 110 electricity for the component, the controller, and for the igniter. But it doesn't take very much wattage at all. And so just having a basic voltage inverter that we're able to plug in to one of those cigarette lighter outlets and plug this into it would be plenty sufficient. And, we don't really use too much hot water unless we're going to fill up the bathtub. My wife is very good about having a pot of water on top of the stove. She uses that to wash her dishes and to do her cleaning. And we also use that for cooking and making coffee. So I'll pan over here and I'll show you how I have this set up with the voltage inverter that I got out of an old RV, actually. And I was very happy to run across this, got it for free, and it works great. All right, so down here in the corner is how we have the inverter set up. And so you can see right here is the fuse box, and of course we got fuses for each light, for all the cigarette lighters, for the water pump, and very important to have everything fused. And so we have the extension cord run in, and these two yellow plugs that plug into the extension cord are what run each bank of the 110 outlets. And so as time goes by, I'll be able to hardwire that into its own actual breaker. There is a breaker out on the electrical pole where this extension cord is plugged in. And then we have two separate banks for the electricity that runs along the side. And on this side, we have all the 110 that it starts with the GFI, and from that, it connects to all the other circuits, so that if you were to ground out one of the plugs in the back room, it would trip the whole string. And then it's the same over on this side. So it runs, and there's a bank of 110, and that's the GFI right there. And so if you short out the one behind the stove, or you short out this one, it will trip the whole thing. Now back to the voltage inverter. So the voltage inverter right here is plugged in, and from the fuse panel and the voltage inverter are the cables that go through the wall and go to the batteries that are outside, that are covered. This is pretty much how the whole thing is set up. If you look over here, you can see that here is the 110 right next to the cigarette lighter, right next to the switch, trying to have all the electricity in the same spot, and it really works out pretty well. All right, guys, thanks for joining us again. Next time we'll go over the plumbing and how that's set up. Did things a little differently because we don't have a septic tank, and we'll get into all those details next time. Thanks for joining us. You guys take care.